right. Quick round of introduction on the speaker, but before that, for those of you here, please use the chat to introduce yourself, where you're from. Let's keep this session interactive. All right. I'm proud to introduce all of you to Brad Quirk. Brad is a seasoned Agile coach. As a data-driven individual, he has blended Agile theory with tales from coalface to create an interactive suite of tools and visualizations to help his clients all over the world. Brad will talk to you about his Dependency Mapper tool for Jira and how it will help teams identify and fix systemic dependency issues. Over to you, Brad.
Thanks, Vijesh. And welcome everyone. So I'm just going to share my screen, share the right screen. So I've shared a link. Hopefully you can see that screen okay. Can everyone see it okay? Thumbs up. Yep, cool. So I've shared the link to this mural in the chat room, so feel free to jump on if you are familiar with the tool, or you can just watch me go through the presentation. That's totally fine as well. But what I thought I'd do is to help kind of introduce the topic of, not just who I am, but also why do I even care about something like dependency mapping to begin with? Why has it been a focus of mine for the past 12 months in particular? And also, what's in it for you, obviously, beyond just listening to me rabble on for the next 30 to 45 minutes. How can we actually collaborate in the future and keep the conversation rolling? Cool. So Vijesh has already done brief introductions, but to, I guess, showcase myself a little bit. So I'm based in Melbourne. Currently contracting for Epic Agile and working for a client in Singapore. So getting used to the different time zones is obviously a bit of a challenge. I'm a program Agile coach by trade. So primarily working at the tribe level, occasionally talking to executives and getting my hands dirty down at the team level as well. And as you can see by some of the photos there, I own a dog, got 2 cats. Haven't got there pictured, but we've got 3 horses as well. They're not on the property that I'm currently. They live at my partner's parents' place. And an interesting fact about me that seems to throw some people for a loop is I actually couldn't code my way out of a wet paper bag until about 3 years ago. So beyond a hello world, I was actually pretty useless. So as part of this, I'll also give you a quick glimpse on how I kind of progressed along that as well, along that journey. But I guess most of all, you can kind of see the biggest post-it note here. If I were to explain my kind of core purpose as a coach, what I'd like to achieve throughout my career, having been part of so many different Agile transformations and so many different delivery pipelines of work, the one thing that I've been noticing more than anything is that we tend as a community to jump to the answers before we really start to understand the questions more than anything. So when I talk about answers, it's like, we should implement Scrum, we should implement SAFe, we should use this technique, we should use that principle. But we haven't actually taken a step back and understood, well, why do I want to go down the Agile path to begin with? What does speed actually look like to me? What does it mean to pivot quickly? Those sorts of things. That's what I really want to help people understand better is like, why do I want to do this in the first place? Because that in itself will then lend itself to the correct answers, right? So that's me getting off my soapbox. That's a little bit about me. So what is the dependency mapping for Jira app? It's, like I said, it's something that I've been working on for the past 12 months. It is a tool that is readily available from the Atlassian marketplace. So I can go to the actual link here. You can see it in all its glory. And this is something that anyone can try out, for at least a 30-day free trial. Whether you're on server, cloud, we're actually not available on data center just yet, but that's only for the super duper large enterprise instances. But 9 times out of 10, you should be able to try this out for yourself. So feel free to try it out in your own time. And not to showboat too much, but some of our users include Disney, eBay, Zip Money, locally here in Australia, Uber and Vodafone as well, just to name a few. Cool. So why dependency tracking? So like I said, until about 3 to 4-ish years ago, I didn't actually know how to code. I was kind of fascinated with data, but I was always kind of too scared to approach the local data gurus in with whoever client I was working with at the time. They were always kind of this, sitting on this pedestal. They always had all the answers to everything, and it was almost too intimidating to even approach them to say, well, can you tell me something I don't know? I always found that too scary. But having worked on several different Agile transformations in particular, what I was finding was that people always kept talking about making data-driven decisions. We've got to make data-driven decisions. We've got to be more data-driven in the way that we operate. It's like, fantastic, everyone agrees. Great, tick that box, we'll walk out of the meeting room. But then no one would talk about it after that. So I actually put my hand up and I said, well, if I actually had access to the data itself, people would be interested in seeing some very basic line charts and scatter plots. And they said, yeah, that'd actually be really cool. All right, awesome. So I cut my teeth, so to speak, learning how to extract data from Jira into a data visualization tool called Tableau, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. At that stage, I wasn't coding at all. I was just using a simple connecting tool to just suck the data out and then spit it into Tableau. So then I could create views like this. And I don't think he's on the call now, but I noticed that Troy McGinnis had actually signed up to this meetup as well. So he's a data whiz in the Agile space who's based out in Boston. And I highly suggest after this call that anyone go check out some of his work, because he actually does have a lot of free templates and articles out there online. And I've really been using that as a bit of inspiration for a lot of what I do as well. So that name again, Troy McGinnis, I highly recommend. But you can see here, just generally, I was trying to answer just a whole bunch of different questions. And at this stage, I was really just throwing stuff at the wall and was seeing what stuck with people. So anything from having dashboards around, health checks, work in progress over time, cycle time, throughput, et cetera, analyzing story points versus cycle time. Is there a trend there? Can we get simpler in the way that we work? Down to trying to categorize what is a monolith. There were certain clients that I worked with saying, we've got to break the monolith. We've got to break this thing down into subservices, but no one could actually tell me what the monoliths were. So let's do some investigation and figure out what that actually means. And also Monte Carlo simulation, which is like nth degree. If you're a risk nerd, a Kanban nerd, anything in that space, you've probably heard of Monte Carlo simulation. Essentially a forecasting tool that uses your history to predict the future. So if you only delivered 10 stories the week prior and 12 stories the week before that, what level of risk are you taking forward with your commitments, and is that an acceptable level of risk? So point being here is that I was kind of covering a whole gambit of different problem areas and just seeing really what the appetite was out there. And eventually COVID hit, had a little bit more time for myself to think. And I kind of thought, well, maybe it's time that I actually start to look at industrializing and commercializing some of the stuff that I've been working on. So I then embarked on the path of creating some Jira apps. But again, I didn't really know who my audience was. I didn't know much. There isn't a whole lot of information that readily available out there on who is accessing the Atlassian marketplace, what kind of roles are they, what are the problems that they're trying to solve, et cetera, So I really just thought, okay, put everything aside, try to put my biases aside. Let's come up with 3 very lean experiments and MVPs, and just see where the attraction is, see what people actually gravitate towards. And by the way, I can see a few questions coming up in the chat. I'm definitely taking note of those, and we'll answer those in a minute as well. But the 3 experiments that I was running pretty much this time last year was one, which I just call a backlog manager. it was pretty much exactly what you see here. It was just a wheel, for lack of a better term, that allowed people to visualize the overall progress of their work from a portfolio level view. So it's really talking about scaled implementations. Also had the dependency mapper as my number 2. So that was focusing on issue link tracking, primarily focused at Scrum Masters and IMs, and pretty straightforward. Are people interested in visualizing and managing their dependencies? And finally, there was also the WIP advisor. So another little pet project of mine was, having dabbled so long in the Kanban world, people always talk about what is the optimal work in progress limit for a particular team. And I wanted to actually kind of help solve that problem, to actually tell a team, based on your inputs and based on the way that you approach the work, maybe this is your WIP limit going forward. How do you feel about that? But as I've kind of listed there, that would be for a very small subset of users. So really just like the Kanban nerds, as I like to affectionately call them. And yeah, pretty much that was it. Honestly, the apps that I released didn't go far beyond this. So they were very superficial, and I pretty much released them for free on the marketplace. It was just to see, again, what was getting traffic, what was resonating with people, where were the pitfalls, where were the gaps, and just kind of go from there. I honestly thought going into it that the backlog manager would win above all, and it was where I spent most of my time initially. But, you know, as you've already probably guessed by the title of this call, the dependency mapper actually won out above everything else. So it was in fact Scrum Masters, iteration managers, even senior managers were really interested in the area of dependency visualization. And as I was talking to people out there in the world, what I was finding more often than not, that they were approaching things from a, you know, either it was a day-to-day perspective of, I just want to know who I need to talk to in terms of the dependencies that I actually own, or it might be from a big room planning perspective where, you know, in a typical pre-COVID environment, we'd be creating these very large, very physical artifacts with, you know, the very famous red strings of dependencies. And then it would then fall to, you know, probably the most junior person in the room to then try and scribe all of that into the tool that they were using, like Jira. So people were saying it'd be great if I could just stay in Jira and run it digitally. So I thought, cool, all right, we'll probably retire the backlog manager, or at least not put as much effort into it. Leave the WIP advisor there and just go whole hog on the dependency mapping tool. And that's kind of what led me to where we are now. So based on that, like I said, there were 3 primary use cases that I was trying to achieve with this app. Like I said, first and foremost, allow teams to run big room planning through Jira itself, irrespective of whether you're in a remote working environment or not. Allow users to view and manage their dependencies at a glance, so more from an operational side. And also to allow managers or anyone with a system level view to analyze the relationships between teams, to say, based on the dependencies that our different teams have and the different permutations in there, is there a way that we can actually optimize and maybe combine teams or segment them out so there's clearer lines of division, that sort of thing. So those are probably my 3 key use cases at the moment. Cool. I'm just checking the chat now. Maybe Vijesh and Jody can help me. Are there any key questions at this stage that are worth calling out?
You've got a couple of them actually, good ones. Do you want to talk through them now?
Yeah, we'll field a couple now.
So Mara, do you want to ask your question yourself?
Let me try, but I cannot compete with the nice Australian accent. I'm trying, Jyoti. Look like I'm coming out of back from a surf session. My first one is a light one. The graphics I've seen look like Power BI. Is that just some skin in it, or the visualizations come from Power BI, not from Tableau?
So these ones in over here, like the more dashboardy type of views, they are primarily driven by Tableau or Power BI. You know, in that sense, they're pretty interchangeable. The way that I've actually learned to code, learned to generate all these data visualizations and everything else is just through simple JavaScript and using a library called d3.js. So I can actually go there now. So there's an open source library, which is written by a guy by the name of Mike Bostock, who at one point in time was the primary data visualization guy for the New York Times. So he built this library himself, he totally open sourced it, and everything is pretty much driven off the back of that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, very much. Sorry, I need some time with the mouse to unmute myself.
That's fine.
So that's very cool. My third one was, since I don't see any other questions, so you used the dependency plug, how can I say, extension just to visualize dependencies to be used for BI planning, or do you have other usages of that?
Yeah, actually, I'll give you a demo right now, and I'll show you what it's all about. How's that sound?
Oh, okay. I was too quick with my question.
That's cool. That's fine. Yeah, so I guess this is the actual app itself. You know, it's a nice segue actually. So thanks for that, Murray. So this is the dependency mapping tool in all its glory. So what you can see here is a simple 4-step process to get everything configured. But the idea is that it's largely taking everything that you already have in your Jira instance and then representing it in something that already seems familiar to you. So the idea is there are some apps out there that will kind of build on top of what you already have to say, all right, we're going to introduce a bunch of custom fields, we're going to introduce a bunch of custom issue types, et cetera, and kind of bloats out or kind of alienates the way that you work currently. My philosophy is cut away all of that and just focus on representing what you have now. So this focuses purely on issue links, which is just the way that you link tickets in Jira, and not much beyond that. So if you're familiar with how to write JQL queries, of which I've got one here, and you know the basics of what you're looking for, you should be able to create something fairly quickly. But I guess to get from point A to point B to at least showcase the tool itself. So I've got a basic JQL query here. So it just says, in my sandbox environment, give me everything that has an epic link that also comes from the project IMC, which is just a fictional project that I've created. I also have the option of selecting certain filters that I've already built in the tool, if I wanted to choose that option. But I've just gone with something a little bit more bespoke for the minute. I can then select what issue types and what issue link types I want to filter out. So in this case, I can say, you know what, I just want bugs, I want epics, I want tasks, and I want features as well, for example. So I've got the option of filtering and choosing what you want to see. I'll include everything for now, just to make it a little bit more high fidelity. And similar with the issue link types as well, these are all the out-of-the-box ones. So you've got things like A relates to B, A blocks B, A is a duplicate of B, et cetera, et cetera. So you can focus and just say, look, I only want to focus on the blockers for now, for example. But again, we'll select all of those. I'll skip over the options for a minute, and I'll actually just go ahead and create the chart. So probably takes 30 seconds. And this is one of the, what are we up to now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 odd charts in the app at the moment. I pretty much already calculated they're ready for you to go. So what we see here, the rainbow patterns you see on the left are the actual projects in this case. So each one of the teams in my world. So I've got one here that's called Atom and Aftermath, one here that's called Ambitious Rabbit, Bawdy Wind, et cetera, et cetera. So they're all my teams. And at the tippy top here, we've got all the dates that are contained within the Jira tickets themselves. So for instance, I can see ADA 247 here is due on the 29th of September, 2019. You can also see the famous red lines of dependencies are already calculated there for you. And we've also got ones over here as well that haven't actually been tagged with a due date field. So they can sit off to the side as well. So you can fix those at a later date. But the idea is that I now have the ability to hover over things and say, okay, for this particular ticket, I can see there's one raised dependency against it. It hasn't received any dependencies. Its due date is on the 15th of October. And maybe I want to fix that. So I can actually click on that and it will just load the ticket right up for you. So I can just edit things on the fly, jump back in the tool, refresh the view, etc. So the idea is to try to keep things as lightweight as possible, but giving you the option of drilling in when you feel ready to. I can also, if you have, if you can see here, I've got a few tickets that both have the same due date. So in this case, the 1st of November, 2019, I can hover over the cell in that table and it'll give me some additional stats around that particular date as well. So for the 1st of November, which is on a Friday, 2019, the earliest ticket due, based on what I've got hovered over there, is due on the 15th of November. And for everything that's been raised, the earliest due is actually on the 17th of December. So looking at those inbound and outbound dependencies and what the relationships are. And again, I can click on those and bring up those two tickets if I want to edit those further. So the idea, again, you can jump in, jump out, etc., etc. You also have a few options around looking at some root cause analysis. So in this case, I've just toggled the root cause analysis tab on, and everything that's highlighted in orange is pretty much our trouble spots. So over here, you can see there are quite a few dependencies raised against this particular ticket. And that will give me the ability to quickly action that and say, well, let's actually focus on that for a minute now, big room planning session, make sure that we've actually considered everything before we commit to the work that we're embarking on. Is this making sense to people? Any questions at this stage? No? Yep.
Just maybe just one. I assume it's the case, but it's possible in your tool to change the visualization to not just show the dependencies, but show other things like references or like not hard dependencies. Like this one needs this one to work, but they work on the same data, or this one is an evolution of this one. I don't know.
Good question. It really depends on how you configure the tool. So like I said, this is primarily referencing anything that has an issue link in Jira. So there's nothing stopping you from creating a new issue link that says everything in here is part of the same family, or everything here is an evolution of the next thing, to your point. I haven't actually captured that in this example, but it's absolutely possible to create that scenario. And if I jump into the options, we've got some additional things that we can tweak with here. So for instance, if I want to filter out internal dependencies, I can toggle that on and off. If I want to not look at resolved dependencies because they're not really dependencies anymore, I can toggle them off and off, on and off. Or I can also include issues which don't have any dependencies. So I can actually look at everything in my instance and look at everything side by side. So I can just toggle that on, refresh the chart, and you can see my my views actually expanded considerably because there's a lot more tickets now as a part of that. So now not everything here has a dependency, but I can still drill into those when I want to. There are also some basic display options. I can change around with the color schemes, but I won't really bore everyone with that. I can also calculate the capacity based on the inputs. So if I just toggle that on and refresh the chart, I can now see at the tippy top how many issues fit under each category. So for instance, on the 8th of October 2019, I can see that there are 11 issues that I have due for that particular date across all of my teams. Or if I look at the horizontal, I can see Impossible Calculator, which is another team. They have 155 dependencies across the whole gambit. So is that something that we actually want to consider? Is that something we want to action? You have that in full view. Alternatively, if you happen to look at story points as your way of calculating capacity, you might use time estimates. Totally fine. I can use time estimates here and recalculate that view. And I can see now that that's been triggered to show those. Another thing that I find is pretty nifty, having worked on various different clients where the teams are operating in different rhythms. So one team might be operating in a Scrum environment where they work under sprints. Another team might be working in more of a free flow Kanban style where they might be using fixed version release dates or due dates or pretty much something that is difficult, to compare otherwise. So a sprint end date versus a due date in the Jira space. It is possible to group the dates by whatever configuration you want as well. So I can only reference the fixed version release date when I look at those dates up in the top row, the sprint end date, the due date, or I can take the earliest or the latest of all three of those. So no matter what, I can always compare apples to apples between my teams. And even if one uses a certain way of working and another uses a different one, ultimately I can blend them together. So that's just the dependency board, which, like I said, is primarily for like a big room planning style event. I've also got other charts here around things like a dependency timeline, which shows if I hover over this, I can see for the Impossible Calculator team, they have, based on all their tickets that occur on the 8th of October, there's one ticket that is overdue that was in the to-do status and 12 that were in the done status. So if something's overdue and it's currently to do, then I actually want to know about that. So I can click on that and see what that overdue issue is. So again, I've got that ability to drill in and take action where I need to. I've also got individual dependencies. I might actually adjust the query to make it a little bit more expanded. Just bear with me. So here you can see I've got all my dependencies arranged in a ring. If I zoom in far enough, each one of those little lines represents an actual dependency. So I can see if I hover over an individual ticket, I can see again, which direction the dependency is going. Is it inbound or outbound? And which team does it actually belong to? So I can see there's one that that particular ticket has raised, that's internal, and one that belongs to, is that Impossible Calculator? Oh, I've lost it now, of course. But you can see that view as well. You can also hover over the team itself, which can show you not only what percentage of dependencies in total does that team have compared to everyone else. So in this case, the Ambitious Rabbit team has 5% of the total dependencies in my portfolio. I can also get a summarized view of all the received, raised, and internal dependencies as well. And I have the ability to click on those and again, drill in, see what those tickets are. So this can also be used, and my data here probably doesn't paint too good of a picture, but you can actually look at the traffic and the way that the lines sort of connect with each other. So in some cases, you can kind of see here, there's quite a lot of localized activity with a particular cluster of issues in the Clever Ghost space that seems to affect a lot of modern aftermath tickets. So let's actually isolate that root cause and take some action on it. This one, actually, I'll simplify my view again. This one is called a Sankey chart, if anyone's familiar with that term. And it actually focuses on the relationships between teams. So if I look at this case, the Boundless Aftermath team has 5 dependencies in total against the Impossible Calculator team. And the thickness of that band from left to right actually shows how many dependencies total those 2 teams have. So based on the project that raised it and the project that received it, I can say, hey, you know, this thick band in particular, the relationship between Impossible Calculator and Adam and Aftermath, they've got 13 dependencies. That might be too much in my portfolio. So I might want to take action there as well. Dependency matrix, which is pretty nifty. So again, I'll just tweak this to make it a little bit more compelling. Cool. Actually, we've got an interesting little bug there, apologies. But what that's actually showing us is just a very simple table view of the summarized dependencies in my portfolio as well. So similar to that Sankey chart that we saw before, just represented in more of a tabular format, I can look here and say, all right, the Boundless Afterthought team has 3 dependencies on Jolly Rabbit. So again, do we need to take action there? To round things out, actually, we've got too many tickets there. You can also look at things from a network view, which some of my clients have preferred as well, just to see, again, you can get a visual representation of just the mass of dependencies that a certain project might have, which helps in some sort of trade-off decisions, as well as a time to resolve chart, which I don't actually have any data for at the moment, I'm afraid, but also a sprint date managing tool as well, which actually handles a weird little intricacy in Jira Cloud, where for whatever reason, you can't actually backdate sprint dates in the tool. So this actually circumvents that and allows you to fully customize when your sprints should start and end, whether it occurs in the past, present, or future. Cool. Were there any questions based on anything else I just presented there? Not quite, that's fine.
Actually, Brad Shakya.
Yep.
Quick one. I'm just wondering, I know that out of all the graphs and you know, data you've shown, what are the most you found useful and immediate feedback you're getting from clients that this is just absolutely valuable? What would that be for you?
Sorry, so which one would be the most immediately useful?
Yeah.
Well, it kind of depends on what your role would be. So like I said, if you are a Scrum Master or if you're someone that facilitates a big room planning event, then probably the dependency board would be right up your alley, something like this. If you are a senior manager that manages a collection of teams and you want to make sure that they're formed correctly, something like the dependency matrix would probably be the way to go. Or if you are just purely interested on what the relationships between your tickets are and how they sit in the overall ecosystem, you might want to look at the individual dependencies in the dependency ring chart, for example. So a few different options.
Thanks a lot, Brad.
But I guess above all, and that's really the key call out, is a lot of these charts I've kind of generated just based off conversations with people like yourselves. So I'm not the kind of person that claims that I hold all the answers. Again, I'm trying to just understand the questions more than anything. So if I happen to have a conversation with any of you offline and you tell me a story to say, hey, I actually work with dependencies in a certain way and I want to visualize them in a certain way, can you actually help me out? Quite often the answer is yes, provided the right conditions, I guess. So by all means, if you see something that's missing or something that you'd like to see that you can't really replicate anywhere else, let me know. We might be able to work something out.
That is awesome. I love the fact that you come from the perspective of understand the question before going this product. Is good one.
Yeah, always try to stay humble. Cool.
I have one, Brad. My impression of this is that it's not just made or able to show dependencies. It's actually able to show any kind of relation between not even two teams, but even instead of looking at a team, sorry, at a project, you can also look at it from a team's perspective. So
yeah, could be internal or external for sure. There's nothing stopping you from. Oh, sorry, Maru.
I wanted to explain my point. Instead of looking at projects, so the purple, turquoise, etc., looking at different teams. So across the whole organization, if you have let's say you have, I don't know, 15 product teams working with each other.
Yeah, I mean, there's. Sorry, but I was just going to say that's actually something I haven't actually talked about. Is you can actually group things by project, by epic, by fixed version, or by sprint. So you actually have a variety of different ways that you can collect things as well. So for instance, if I want to look at an epic view, hopefully this works, you get a totally different representation. So in this case, each one of these chunks is an epic that I can look at the relationship between other epics. And similarly on my dependency board, you can see it kind of blows it out a bit because I'm dealing with quite a few epics. But now each one of these rows represents a different epic. And like I said, you could do something similar with your fixed versions. You can do something similar with your sprints, compare sprint on sprint relationships. You actually have a lot of flexibility in that regard too.
Thank you.
Brad, I have a question. It might sound stupid, but irrespective. Irrespective. See, now you have given us, I mean, you have displayed this tool as something that can look at it from a dependency perspective when you have a scaled agile type of team. What if it comes to a specific Scrum team? It's just few people. I know that user stories are supposed to be independent, negotiable and all, but just wanted to see it from that angle. How does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, if you happen to be part of a particular project, so in this case, I've just picked, project equals WIC, which again is just one of my sandbox teams. What I can actually do is if I switch back to project, and maybe this is a bad example, but this will actually show you all of the internal dependencies. And if you happen to have any dependencies external to that team, you have the option of whether you want to include that or not. So you can be purely inward focused if you want, or you can say, all right, I sit in this particular project team. What do I need to be aware of? So to your point, it can just be within one particular team if you want it. No other questions at this stage?
So one question from my end here. So thanks for the presentation. I think this was really great. I'm really looking forward to use this tool, the Dependency Mapper, for my teams as well, right? So so what are the prerequisites? Like, do we need to really have the stories already marked as dependent in Jira before we use this tool, or this tool is flexible where I can pull in my stories for a specific team or for release or sprint wise, and then I can create the dependency here, like how we do in program boards and safe. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you can start from either end of the spectrum. So the idea is that by focusing on the issue links, it's something that the bulk of Jira users will use as part of their day-to-day activity regardless. So chances are, if you're using Jira, your teams are probably already using issue links in some way. So this is just a case of collecting that and starting from there. Alternatively, you can go in the total opposite direction, and you might have nothing tagged in there whatsoever, and you might just start building it from scratch. And this can actually help you build out those views of what is dependent on what. So for instance, and I've probably gone too wide, almost crashed my computer because I've got 10,000 odd tickets here. Let me just tweak things a little bit, just bear with me. So I'll highlight the point in a second, but pretty much I'd be willing to bet that you already have enough data to get started overnight if you wanted. So for instance, if I load up this one particular ticket, it's just looking at the issue links that exist within that particular ticket there as you can see. So this one, BOA 35, blocks MOA 272. That's all you need to get started. Cool. So if there's no other questions, I guess the closing note from my end is, if you haven't already picked up, more than anything, I'm really just looking to initiate some conversations and get some dialogue going around what particular problems people like yourselves might be experiencing in this space. So if you happen to be handling dependencies in a certain way, if you have certain scenarios where, you know, I wish I could just have this thing that doesn't exist currently, drop me a line, whether it's through LinkedIn, or you probably have my details on the meetup page as well. Just shoot me a message and say, Brad, it'd be great to chat for a half hour to an hour and just see what's possible. And I'd love to help you all out in some way or fashion. Like I said, to actually use the Dependency Mapper app, it's free for, I want to say, at least 30 days, depending on which location you reside in. So here locally in Australia, it's a 30-day free trial. In other areas, it can even extend up to 2 or 3 months. So definitely check that out. But have a play with it. Let me know what you think. Good, bad, or otherwise. Obviously, try to keep it constructive. But my closing note, I guess, is in terms of, and thanks for that, Sinkey. My closing note is, you know, what's next for me, and I guess looking beyond for, I guess, what my second app in the Jira space would be, looking beyond the 3 initial prototypes that I created. It's actually a case of trying to turn something like this, which most of you who are familiar with Jira have probably seen before, of a basic workflow. It goes from like open to in progress, closed, etc., and actually start to convert that into a flow-based visualization to show you how tickets are flowing through the system, and give you views on how long something is spending in a certain status, what the defect rate is, and where the bottlenecks are in your system, that sort of thing. So that's probably my next focus area for the foreseeable future as well. So if you'd like to chat more about that, if you're interested in understanding more about flow in your particular space, again, drop me a line, say good day, we'll have a conversation.
Yeah, this visual, I love this. Pretty cool.
Thanks. It's actually based on, it's not based on that. I also have a website as well where I just got to keep all my portfolio stuff. So if anyone wants to go to quirkconsulting.com.au, I keep a lot of my prototype visualizations here, but that flow-based one is based off this, which I created a couple of years ago, which looks at the end-to-end flow for a particular client I was working with. And in this case, the story here was that it might be a little bit difficult to make out, but this particular client, they took customer requests, obviously, and they also had executive requests coming from their C-suite. The story here was that we found out through some analysis that there was a particular executive that was circumventing the entire process. They were going beyond big room planning, beyond steer codes, everything else, and they had a direct line to one of the teams. And as a result, that team was getting overloaded and they were creating a lot of defects in their system. So they were actually getting put on the hook to say, well, this team's actually underperforming. We should get rid of them. When actually the root cause was a lot further upstream. There was a certain actor that was actually overwhelming that particular team. So those sorts of flow interactions and conversations and stories, that's really my, my other passion topic. So that'll be my next focus.
This one is also my favorite.
Thanks. Hopefully I get to spend more time on it soon. I actually haven't had much time to dedicate to this lately. Been a little bit overwhelmed with my day job, as it were. But yeah, if there are no other questions, thank you all. And hopefully we get to chat again in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad, for this wonderful session. So we are now it's 6:53. We've got 7 more minutes. So those of you who want to stay back to have a discussion, you're free to. Officially, we are done with this meetup. So I'll just be stopping my recording. One moment.